2026 honestly feels like one of those rare years where old-school gaming history finally collides head-on in cinemas, and it's happening in a way that feels almost engineered for longtime arcade kids growing up on cabinets and crusty CRTs. After years of delays, reboots, and quiet reshuffling behind the scenes, we're suddenly staring at two massive fighting game adaptations landing almost back-to-back: Mortal Kombat 2 from Warner and New Line, and a brand new Street Fighter movie from Legendary and Paramount. Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, a rivalry that was born in arcades, fueled console wars, and basically defined an entire generation, are now competing on the big screen again, only this time with real budgets, serious directors, and studios that understand just how valuable these IPs actually are. And what makes this interesting isn't just timing, it's how wildly different their approaches are shaping up to be, both in tone and in how deep they're willing to go into their own lore. Mortal Kombat 2 already feels like it's swinging first. The marketing push has been aggressive for a movie that is still months away, and when outlets dropped those new images of characters like Liu Kang, Shao Kahn, and Johnny Cage, it kind of confirmed what insiders had been whispering about for months, that this sequel is going way harder into Outworld, Netherrealm, and Edenia instead of just hanging around Earthrealm gyms and dusty MMA cages. One shot in particular really stood out: Liu Kang facing off against Shao Kahn in what looks like a massive, almost mythic confrontation, with armor, war banners, and that classic tyrant energy that fans associate with Kahn from the MK2 and MK3 era. That's not something you casually throw into a promo. If it's the climax of your movie, studios almost never burn their Act 3 money shot for a first look still, which pretty much tells us this fight happens early, likely in the first act, almost as a cold open statement. And that lines up perfectly with the biggest leak so far, that Liu Kang dies at the hands of Shao Kahn incredibly early in the film, ripping away Earthrealm's champion in a way that instantly changes the vibe of the whole story. That alone is a huge statement, because in the games, Liu Kang is the guy, the monk-turned-warrior who beats Shang Tsung, Shao Kahn, and pretty much every major threat at least once across multiple timelines. In classic continuity, he wins the Mortal Kombat tournament, smashes Kahn, and eventually becomes a literal god of fire and thunder in the reboot era, especially in Mortal Kombat 11 Aftermath, where he fuses with Raiden and takes on the role of Keeper of Time. Killing him off immediately is the exact opposite of playing it safe. It's almost like they're speedrunning MK Deadly Alliance and flipping it so that Kahn finishes the job instead of Shang Tsung and Quan Chi. But from a storytelling point of view, it's actually a pretty smart move, because it shocks the audience, resets expectations, and instantly elevates Shao Kahn as an unstoppable force who doesn't just threaten Earthrealm, he casually deletes its main defender. At the same time, it cracks the door wide open for Netherrealm to become a core part of the story, instead of just background lore, which is exactly where the modern games live, with dead heroes coming back as twisted revenants and hell itself feeling like a second battlefield rather than a final destination. Once Netherrealm enters the picture, the entire rulebook changes. A promo image showing Johnny Cage and Kano standing alongside Scorpion strongly points to a stretch of the movie where Earthrealm's fighters are literally trekking through hell alongside a resurrected Ninja Spectre, instead of just meeting him in a random alley or tournament match. According to leaks circling around fan spaces, when the fighters cross into Netherrealm, they'll come face to face with Noob Saibot and even Kung Lao while searching for Liu, which suggests that death in this universe is more like a relocation than a full stop. That's where things start getting really dark, close to MK9 and MKX territory, where half the roster is dead, corrupted, or brought back under someone else's control. The filmmakers already said at convention panels that the sequel is way more intense than the first movie, with a higher body count and more brutal consequences. And cast members have teased that there are no protected characters this time. Anyone can die and stay dead, at least for a while. In a Mortal Kombat story that introduces Quan Chi, that kind of chaos is exactly the point, because death stops being an endpoint and becomes part of the narrative machinery, a mechanic the villains can exploit. Quan Chi being played by Damon Harriman is a big deal, because he's the kind of actor who can flip from weirdly polite to absolutely sinister in half a sentence, which is perfect for a necromancer who manipulates everyone from the shadows. We still haven't seen his final look in detail, but his role is already pretty clear. He's Shao Kahn's loyal sorcerer, a pure evil manipulator whose entire thing is bringing the dead back as revenants and playing multiple factions against each other. That alone basically confirms the Revenant storyline, the phase where fallen heroes come back with dead eyes, cracked armor, and just enough personality left to make it hurt when they attack their old friends. The Revenant angle has been teased everywhere, from actor comments to licensed Mortal Kombat 2 merch, hinting at corrupted versions of classic fighters instead of simple palette swaps. Max Huang hinting at Kung Lao's return after getting his soul sucked sucked in the first movie was the final nail in that coffin, so Kung Lao is coming back. Just not in the way fans remember him, more like the MK9 version who spends most of the story wearing the scars of his own death. Noob is also effectively confirmed, and his origin is getting a slight twist compared to the games. In the classic lore, he is Bi-Han, the original Sub-Zero, resurrected as a wraith by Quan Chi after being killed by Scorpion at the first tournament. In the new movie continuity, the first film already set up Bi-Han as Sub-Zero with a clear villain streak, so turning him into Noob Saibot as a Revenant fits almost perfectly, especially if Quan Chi is the one pulling the strings. Instead of a straight adaptation of one specific game, the movie version leans more into him being a corrupted resurrection created by Quan Chi, a walking reminder that sticking close to the sorcerer always comes with a price. Once the Earthrealm fighters realize Liu isn't completely gone and is actually trapped in Netherrealm, everything shifts into rescue mode, which is where the narrative feels closest to MKX. With missions into Hell to retrieve fallen allies, Scorpion steps into a much more heroic role here, closer to how he's portrayed in later games where Hanzo Hasashi tries to atone and protect Earthrealm instead of acting like a pure revenge ghost. Hanzo becomes the one uncovering Quan Chi's secrets, guiding the team through Netherrealm, and revealing that not only Liu can be saved, but potentially every fallen warrior if they can break the Revenant curse in time. There are also rumors floating around about Cole Young dying, though nothing concrete has been confirmed publicly, and the studio has been very quiet about his exact role this time. But honestly, Liu's death feels like that big game-changing moment producer Todd Garner teased a while back when talking about something that would shock both casual viewers and hardcore fans. The way they talk about Shao Kahn is especially telling, because some producers and commentators have openly compared him to Thanos in Infinity War, not just as a physical threat, but as the character who structurally owns the movie. That kind of comparison usually means the villain wins, or at least walks away with a partial victory that leaves the heroes broken and scattered going into a third installment. It wouldn't be shocking at all if Mortal Kombat 2 ends with Shao Kahn still standing, Earthrealm in ruins, and maybe only a handful of survivors left to regroup, echoing the way Infinity War let Thanos sit and watch the sunset while everyone else picked up the pieces. Mortal Kombat 3 is clearly in the long-term plan as the big rebellion and revenge movie, but its future depends heavily on how the studio situation shakes out, especially with Warner Bros. Dealing with shifting strategies, potential partners, and constant restructuring of their film slate. If new leadership comes in or streamers get more involved, franchises like this can change direction fast, either leaning harder into cinematic universes or getting wrapped up prematurely. One thing that's absolutely clear is that Mortal Kombat 2 is doubling down on death, violence, and dark fantasy, pushing harder than the first movie that already tried to show creative fatalities. The hope is that it's not just there for shock value or R-rated trailers, but actually tied into character arcs and real consequences. Because when a world keeps resurrecting people, the emotional stakes can evaporate if writers are lazy. Shang Tsung's line about souls and death in the first film already hits differently when you see where the sequel is heading, because it foreshadows an entire ecosystem built on consuming and recycling lives. With Quan Chi in play, characters dying left and right almost becomes part of the rules of the universe, like a sick economy where every kill is fuel for someone else's power. But this time it feels more intentional, like death is a storytelling tool instead of just a fatality checklist, mirroring how MK9 used the mass death of Earthrealm heroes to reset the entire saga and justify Raiden's desperate time-bending gambit. A huge part of why this sequel feels different is Johnny Cage. Karl Urban stepping into the role was one of those casting choices that raised eyebrows at first, mostly because people associate him with grittier, no-nonsense roles like in Dredd or The Boys. Not a Hollywood diva doing shadow kicks and signing autographs in sunglasses. At events in Brazil and other promo stops, Urban talked about how he took the role partly because he wanted a more physically intense part after feeling sidelined in The Boys Season 4, and actively reached out, got the script within a week, and jumped on board. He has called this one of the most physically demanding roles of his career, which says a lot coming from someone who has been in action-heavy projects for years. And it lines up with rumors that Johnny has several extended fight sequences instead of just one showcase brawl. Johnny is clearly positioned as one of the main driving forces of the movie, not just a side gag. The writers also made a smart call by leaning into Urban's age instead of fighting it, turning this version of Johnny into a washed-up action star who's past his prime and very aware of it. That angle fits perfectly with the meta-commentary of Mortal Kombat as a franchise that's been around since the 90s, because Johnny becomes a kind of avatar for aging icons trying to stay relevant in a world that keeps getting darker and more complex. He's still charismatic, still funny, still dropping one-liners and ego-driven reactions, but there's a real bitterness there, a sense that his best days are behind him and his career is sliding downhill even as the world asks him to become an actual hero instead of playing one. Watching him awaken his arcana and find a bigger purpose gives the character real weight, turning that green energy and stuntman background into something tied to his sense of identity and self-worth. He doesn't feel like pure comic relief anymore. He feels like the emotional entry point into this insane world for both longtime fans and new viewers who need someone grounded to latch onto while the gods and revenants start flying around. Because of that shift, Cole Young naturally fades into the background. Whether he actually dies or not almost feels secondary now, which is weird considering how heavily the first movie tried to build the entire franchise around him as the brand new audience surrogate. The idea on paper made sense. Invent a clean slate character with family stakes so casual viewers have someone to follow through the lore-heavy world. In practice, though, it didn't fully land because Mortal Kombat fans already know this universe inside and out, and casual audiences weren't given a strong enough reason to latch onto Cole specifically when they had Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Sonya, and Liu standing right there. It seems like the filmmakers recognized that and quietly corrected course, letting Johnny Cage take over as the flawed but iconic human center of the story. Now the narrative unfolds largely through Johnny's perspective. He's the lens through which we explore Earthrealm, Outworld, Netherrealm, and Edenia, which instantly makes everything feel bigger but also more grounded because we're seeing cosmic-level insanity through the eyes of a guy who still cares about his next movie deal. On top of that, Edenia is finally getting real attention instead of being just a line in a character bio. Shao Kahn's invasion, his takeover, and the slow destruction of its people aren't just background details this time. They exist on screen to firmly establish Martin Ford's Shao Kahn as the ultimate villain of this cinematic universe. A ruler who doesn't just want to win a tournament. He wants to erase cultures and histories. Edenia also allows the films to expand visually and culturally, presenting a realm that feels distinct from both Earthrealm and the grim, rocky Outworld from the first movie, with its own architecture, costumes, and maybe even fighting styles tied to its royal lineage. Characters like Kitana and Sindel. The increased budget plays directly into that because with Netherrealm, Edenia, and likely several iconic locations from classic stages we haven't even seen yet, Mortal Kombat 2 is operating on a much larger scale than the first film's mostly desert and warehouse settings. Ultimately, though, everything comes down to performance, both in terms of cast and in terms of box office and streaming numbers, because that will decide if a third movie ever gets greenlit or if this ambitious middle chapter becomes the accidental finale. And that's where the contrast in 2026 really hits. Mortal Kombat 2 is clearly aimed at fans first, darker, bloodier, and heavier on fantasy elements like Netherrealm and Edenia, willing to kill off its main hero early and lean into resurrection horror, while Street Fighter is shaping up to be the crowd pleaser, a clean new starting point for general audiences with iconic characters in recognizable costumes and a simple but effective tournament setup. Street Fighter might actually pull in broader audiences just by being easier to watch for people who don't want to see skulls crushed every 10 minutes, and by locking in an October 16, 2026 theatrical release that lets it ride Halloween-adjacent buzz without being a horror movie. Mortal Kombat 2, meanwhile, was pushed from October to May 2026, which means Warner's and New Line are betting on it as more of a summer event film, hoping that word of mouth and hardcore fan energy carry it through a much more competitive window.